And these days, as I get older, I'm a slug, man. I don't leave the house. I don't do much. I don't do much either. I haven't for the last couple of years.
Blake Shelton has it all. 28 #1 singles, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and a seemingly perfect life with Gwen Stefani. But what if the man he is today wasn't shaped by success, but by something that happened when he was just 14? For decades, that moment has quietly followed him, and now it's beginning to surface in ways no one expected. This isn't just the story of a superstar, but the journey of a past that has never truly closed. Origins and a childhood tragedy in Ada, Oklahoma. Blake Shelton's story does not begin on a brightly lit stage in Nashville, but in a small shared bedroom in Ada, Oklahoma. In that room, he was not a country music superstar, he was just a young boy who had a brother he admired more than anyone in the world. Richie Shelton, 10 years older than Blake, was his roommate and his hero, someone who would deeply shape his life. Through the thin wall that separated their space, Blake first heard the raw, honest sounds of Hank Williams Jr. and Waylon Jennings. Those songs became the soundtrack of his brother's life, and of Blake's childhood a presence he believed would always be there. But then, everything stopped. In 1990, when Richie was just 24 years old, he was killed in a car accident. There was no long goodbye, no final conversation, no chance to say the things that needed to be said. Blake was only 14, and in a single devastating moment, his entire world collapsed. Years later, looking back on that day, he could only describe the feeling with a simple, haunting sentence. "My world just went silent." What matters most is not just the loss itself, but how a 14-year-old boy dealt with it, or more accurately, how he didn't. No one taught him how to process that kind of grief, so he buried it. And over time, that pain didn't disappear, it changed. It became a relentless work ethic, familiar routines, anything that could keep his mind from drifting back to that moment. To the world, Blake Shelton would grow into someone strong, funny, and seemingly unbreakable. But the 14-year-old boy who never truly healed was still there, just beneath the surface. So when Blake left Ada at 17 to chase his dream, he wasn't just carrying a guitar and ambition, he was carrying an unhealed wound that would follow him for decades. The grueling journey to conquer Nashville, ages 17 to 21. Just 2 weeks after graduating from high school, a 17-year-old Blake Shelton did something most teenagers in Ada, Oklahoma would never dare to imagine. He packed his few belongings, grabbed his only guitar, and, with his thick Oklahoma accent, drove alone to Nashville, Tennessee. He arrived in the heart of country music without a plan, without industry connections, and with nothing but a burning dream of becoming a country star. Those first few years in Nashville were incredibly difficult. Blake lived in a rundown apartment and took on manual jobs just to survive and keep his dream alive. He even worked at a music publishing company in a minor role, far from the spotlight he was chasing. He knocked on the doors of record labels, played in nearly empty bars, and faced constant rejection. Industry insiders told him his voice was too country and his style out of date. For 4 long years, all he heard was no. The turning point came when he met Mae Boren Axton, a veteran songwriter and the mother of Hoyt Axton. She saw raw potential in the young Oklahoman and took him under her wing. Mae introduced Blake to one of Nashville's most respected producers, Bobby Braddock. Known for writing hits for legends like George Jones and Tammy Wynette, Braddock immediately recognized something authentic in Blake, his songwriting and his distinctive voice. With his support, Blake secured a record deal with Giant Records in 1998. After years of preparation, by 2001, Blake was finally ready to release his debut single, a heartfelt ballad titled Austin. The song, built around a story of love told through voicemail messages, was meant to introduce him to the world. Everything was set for launch. But just weeks before its release, Giant Records suddenly shut down. In an instant, it felt like his big break was slipping away. Then, in a stroke of luck, executives at the parent company, Warner Brothers Records, heard Austin and were impressed enough to transfer his contract and release the song anyway. The result was explosive. Austin soared to #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart and stayed there for 5 consecutive weeks. Blake Shelton, the determined kid from Ada, Oklahoma, had scored a #1 hit on his very first try. Success had finally arrived faster than anyone expected, and the way he handled that sudden fame would quietly set the stage for everything that followed: an exploding career and the culture of alcohol, the redneck identity. Following the monumental success of Austin, Blake Shelton's career didn't just grow, it took off. The numbers speak for themselves. Over the next 2 decades, he would rack up nearly 30 #1 singles on the country charts and sell tens of millions of albums worldwide. But the biggest catalyst that transformed him from a country music star into a household name was the reality television show The Voice. Beginning in 2011, Blake became a coach on the show, holding his iconic red chair for 23 consecutive seasons. With a reported salary of up to $13 million per season, he became one of the highest-paid and most recognizable personalities on television. As his fame and fortune grew, another part of Blake's identity was being amplified: his connection to alcohol. For him, drinking wasn't something to hide, it became a visible, even celebrated part of his public image, reinforcing the authentic Oklahoma country persona. He was often seen holding a large Starbucks cup, which he openly admitted sometimes contained vodka and Sprite. In 2018, after taking a tumble on stage during a concert in Oregon, he didn't show embarrassment. Instead, he joked online about having had a bit too much to drink. In the world of country music, this behavior wasn't necessarily seen as a flaw. For many, it was proof that he was real. It became part of the redneck identity he openly embraced. "My heart and soul is a redneck," he once said in an interview, "and that includes drinking and getting stupid." For millions of fans, this made him even more relatable, not a distant celebrity, but someone you could imagine sharing a beer with at a local bar. But behind the humor and the image, a more complicated pattern was forming. Tying alcohol so closely to his public identity blurred the line between persona and habit. It became something familiar, perhaps, even a way to keep his mind from drifting back to the past, especially the loss of Richie that had never fully faded. The Miranda Lambert marriage and the peak of The Voice, 2011 to 2015. In 2011, the same year The Voice premiered and launched him into a new level of fame, Blake Shelton married Miranda Lambert. A country music superstar in her own right, she was a talented and formidable artist. Together, they quickly became Nashville's golden couple. On the red carpet, they embodied power and glamour, and to the outside world, it seemed they had everything. However, the pressure of being 2 A-list artists with demanding, globe-spanning schedules began to erode their relationship. They spent more time apart than together, and rumors of tension and infidelity started to circulate. For years, they tried to maintain the image of a happy couple, but by July 2015, they could no longer keep up the illusion. In a brief joint statement, they announced their divorce. The media reaction was immediate and intense. Speculation and accusations spread quickly, and Blake, once in control of his public image, found his private life under constant scrutiny. It was a deeply difficult period, one he would later describe as among the lowest points in his life. In a later interview, he admitted that after finishing an official interview about the divorce, the first thing he did was walk into a bar and order a vodka. A familiar coping pattern seemed to resurface. It was during this turbulent time that an unexpected connection began to form, not on stage, but on the set of The Voice. Gwen Stefani, a pop icon and fellow coach, was going through her own painful and very public divorce from Gavin Rossdale. One day, Blake quietly told her that his marriage was over. Gwen didn't respond with curiosity or empty words. She simply looked at him, and her eyes filled with tears. She was genuinely moved by his pain. In that raw, honest moment, Blake realized he wasn't alone. Someone standing right in front of him understood what he was going through. It became the first real glimmer of light in a very long and difficult chapter of his life. Gwen Stefani, A Light in the Darkness, 2015 to 2023. The connection between Blake Shelton and Gwen Stefani didn't begin with a sudden spark of romance. It began with a shared sense of pain. They were both going through highly public and deeply personal divorces at the same time. Coming from completely different musical worlds, he from country, she from pop and ska, they found common ground in something far more personal: their shared experience of heartbreak. Their relationship developed slowly. It began with a simple email in which Blake shared his number, writing, "If you're not opposed to it, I'd like to talk to somebody that's going through the same thing I am." Gwen replied, and what started as a few messages gradually turned into conversations. Over time, a genuine friendship formed, and from that, something deeper began to grow. The path forward wasn't easy. Gwen, a city girl from California, had to adjust to a completely different world. Blake once joked that he had to explain to her what an antelope was. At the same time, the media was relentless, questioning and scrutinizing their unlikely relationship. At one point, the pressure nearly pushed Gwen to walk away. But instead, they leaned on each other to get through it. In Gwen, Blake found a kind of understanding and calm he hadn't experienced before. In Blake, Gwen found a sense of stability, something that felt like home. On July 3, 2021, after nearly 6 years together, they were married. The ceremony took place in a small chapel that Blake had built himself on his ranch in Tishomingo, Oklahoma. It was an intimate gathering, attended only by close family and friends. But Gwen wasn't just marrying a man, she was stepping into a completely different lifestyle. One that included parts of Blake he had never felt the need to change. She accepted him as he was, even the parts that weren't always easy. And in that kind of steady, non-judgmental support, Blake found something he hadn't had before: space. Space not to run, not to perform, but slowly to begin facing parts of his past he had long avoided. Leaving The Voice and a serious health decline, 2023 to early 2024. In 2023, after 12 years and 23 seasons, Blake Shelton made a surprising announcement. He was leaving his coach's chair on The Voice. His reason was simple and personal. He wanted to spend more time at home in Oklahoma with Gwen Stefani and her 3 sons and be present for the everyday moments of their lives. But stepping away from the relentless pace of television created a void. For years, work had filled his time and kept his mind occupied. Without it, old habits began to resurface. A quieter, more sedentary lifestyle started to take a toll, and his weight reportedly climbed to around 250 pounds in the months that followed. His routine became increasingly inactive, and Gwen began to worry not about his appearance, but about his long-term health. Blake was aware of it too. He admitted he wanted to cut back on drinking, but struggled to follow through. Then, one morning in early 2024, a private moment of reckoning arrived. Blake stepped onto the scale in his bathroom and saw the number staring back at him. There were no cameras, no audience, just him and the truth. He looked at his reflection and said quietly, "Man, you have to do something about this." It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, something had to change. The awakening and the real journey of change, 2024 to 2025. Blake Shelton's decision to change didn't look like a movie montage. There was no single dramatic moment, just small, consistent steps that began at home on his ranch. He started with his routine. His diet shifted toward simpler, healthier meals, and he began moving more each day. Long walks across his property gradually became part of his daily life, eventually leading to more structured workouts like boxing. His greatest challenge, however, was alcohol. Cutting back wasn't just about health, it meant confronting a part of his identity. For years, the image of the hard-drinking redneck had been tied to who he was in public. Letting go of that, even partially, wasn't easy. He didn't quit entirely, but he made a clear effort to reduce how often and how much he drank. The most important change didn't happen in the gym or the kitchen, but in private. Blake began to face the grief he had carried for decades after losing his brother Richie, this time without pushing it aside. He started to talk about it, to sit with it, instead of numbing it. Throughout it all, Gwen Stefani played a steady role. She wasn't there to push him, but to support him, walking alongside him, sharing the process, and creating a space where he didn't feel judged. By 2025, the changes were clear. Blake Shelton had lost a significant amount of weight, his energy had returned, and his mind felt clearer. And with that clarity came something else, his creativity. He returned with new music that many saw as some of the most honest work of his career. Blake Shelton in 2026, a changed man. In 2026, at 50, Blake Shelton is living a different life. His world now centers around his ranch in Tishomingo, Oklahoma, not as a break from work, but as home. His most important role is as a stepfather to Gwen Stefani's 3 sons, Kingston, Zuma, and Apollo. With Zuma, who shares his love for country music, those moments often turn into something simple. Sitting on the porch, playing guitar, and singing old Merle Haggard songs. His career has shifted too. A Las Vegas residency now lets him perform without being away for long stretches, while new projects keep him connected to music. He's more stable physically, and while alcohol is still a challenge, he faces it more honestly. Not perfectly, just consistently. What's changed most isn't his career or his health. It's how he carries his past. He never moved on from losing Richie. He learned to live with it. Today, he carries that weight alongside his family, as a more honest version of himself. Blake Shelton's story isn't about perfection. It's about change, facing what you've avoided, and learning that real strength comes from dealing with it. What do you take away from his journey?